Hello, boils and ghouls. Welcome to a special episode of Dads from the Crypt. We are going to be diving into the very first episode of the new EC Comics line, Cruel Universe. But to help me doing that, we have a very special guest. His name is Ben Dickow. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing? Nice to have me back.
Yeah, you've been on a couple times now. You did a Crypt episode and you talked about your theater company. But for those that might not be aware of you and your work, why don't you reintroduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. So I'm Ben Dickow. I'm the principal mind behind Captured Oral Fantasy Theater. We're a LA-based theater company that for the past, 10, 15 years, have been able to turn old comics into live multimedia theater events. And for over 10 years, we've had the exclusive rights to be able to take all of the EC comics and turn them into these live experiences.
Yeah, I went to one, I think it was last October, it was right before
Yep.
Halloween,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a hoot. I had so much fun with that.
Thanks.
I loved the ads and little like interludes. Those are really fun. I mean, the comics
Thanks.
obviously were the highlight, but
Yeah.
you really, that's what really makes it feel like, an experience.
Yeah, you're getting immersed into a comic book world or something like that.
Mhm.
And just like last October, we're going to be doing another Halloween show coming up. We don't have a date yet, but it's coming up in October. And our shows, we do the stories, we do live sound effects, we project the art, we have live music. In between the stories, we do ads and little bits, and then we have a singer who comes out. And it's all thematic. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for being there last October.
No problem. Yeah, the music was great. Yeah, seeing the sound effects being done in real time was really, really neat. I like that. That's the kind of stuff I love, seeing that stuff. But you also, while we're talking about AC Comics, have a William Gaines musical.
Yes. All right. Bring it up. And actually that's real deals. So this is the 70th anniversary of the April 21st, 1954 Senate hearings on juvenile delinquency that brought Bill Gaines up in front of the Senate to defend comics and the decency of comics. And for years, I've been trying to turn this into a live show. And we finally, probably about 3 years ago, realized, hey, this would be a great musical. And so we wrote a bunch of music. Actually, our music guy, Ray, wrote a bunch of music, and I wrote a script. And it is a full-on Broadway style musical show about the 1954 Senate hearings. And it's called Tales from the Comic Book Crackdown. It's got all your favorite characters, like the whole EC office and Bill Gaines and Frederick Wortham and all those guys. And to do a quick plug, two quick plugs. One, we just heard that the musical got accepted into an ASCAP workshop. There are very few of these musicals that get picked every year. I think maybe 5 of them in the country. So we got picked to kind of workshop this show at the University of Nebraska early September. So a bunch of people will give us notes, and we'll see the first act performed. And then in October, we are going to be doing the first true workshop performance of the whole thing in Long Beach. I don't have the dates yet. I think it's the first weekend in October, but that's going to be fun. That'll be the true sort of workshop debut. And then after that, we're going to work on a venue to do the full scale production.
Now, for someone who's not a theater person, I enjoy theater, but I don't know the ins and outs. So what does it mean to do a workshop?
Basically, it's just like it's a performance where you're going to get notes at the end of it. So in Nebraska, that's what's going to happen. But for us in Long Beach, we're going to stage it very simply. All the actors are going to be at music stands. We're going to project stuff. We'll have live music. We'll be doing the script in singing, but we're not going to do any blocking or move around the stage or have, props. It's mostly just to kind of get the words and music out there to see how it lands with audiences and make some little tweaks. And then, hopefully sometime in the first half of next year, we'll have a full show.
That'd be amazing. Yeah. And have you performed it, the full thing? I think, no. Did you do it at Comic-Con, or you did parts of it there?
We've done parts of it. We've done little slices of it and stuff like that. And actually this project has been, not to beat a dead horse on this topic today, but this project has been in my head for like 20, 25 years. Ever since I saw that you could just get the transcript of the Senate hearings, I'm like, wait, it's just there. So the first iteration was just simply us during a Capture All Fantasy Theater show doing the transcription, and it's so ridiculous. Like, to do an interpretation of it, you don't have to write any jokes. It's just so insane.
Right.
Like, the questions that the senators ask are like, they talk about like, what would happen if your dad was a werewolf? Would you agree with that? Like, what? Just stupid stuff. So
So
at
are
first I thought,
you?
oh, let's just do that. But
Mhm.
then, yeah, anyway, we've tried it out in many different ways, but this musical thing seems like a good one. Speaking of Comic-Con, by the way, we
Yeah.
just
How was it?
came from Comic-Con. It was great. We did a panel on Friday about the 70th anniversary, and we did a little excerpt of the play, but there was EC all over the place.
That's so
The
cool.
new EC, the Oni Press had a party with the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund on Thursday. There were multiple panels throughout the weekend about EC. There just was a real energy and vibe out there. It's great. It's a good time to be an EC fan.
Yes, it is. Real quick, I was going to ask about the play. If you're going to do like in Hamilton, where they took the debates and do like a rap battle version. Is there going to be a rap battle in yours?
There's not quite a rap battle, but there's a rhythm to the testimony that comes out in the way that we perform it.
Nice.
I don't want to,
Yeah.
Hamilton's great, but we can't steal from them, right?
Still from the best.
That's true.
As mentioned, actually, that's a good segue to talking about the revival and the Epitaphs from the Abyss, because one of the things in there is about stealing scripts.
That's true.
Can you give me just your high level impression / review of Epitaphs from the Abyss before we dive into Cruel Universe?
I think it's great. I'm really, I think the art, the art is really great. It's nice to see this kind of storytelling kind of brought into a contemporary way. I mean, I've been immersed in the old school 70-year-old EC for such a long time. To see the same style come out with, the coloring and the styles, 21st century is great. To see the more diverse characterizations and themes is great, but still kind of keep that EC spirit. I think it's a great start. I can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah. I think now that I've had some time to process, I think I had some really good highs, but also had some lows. So, but I think like anytime you come out of the gate with a pilot project or anything like that, that's what you're kind of going to get.
Absolutely.
They're still figuring out their footing. Yeah. But today we're going to talk about Cruel Universe issue 1. And obviously you're the comic book historian. Can you talk about, at least comparatively? I mean, I've read plenty of them, but
sure.
I think it's on your byline somewhere, comic historian.
Lecture on the history of comics. Yes.
Yes. So can you talk about like how EC got into the sci-fi fantasy genres, kind of what that legacy is?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really, I mean, not to be too not to have too much hyperbole, I guess, but EC really blazed some trails, right? So they weren't the first horror comic, but definitely the most successful of the early horror comic. The first horror comic was Eerie #1 in 1947. Then nobody did horror until late 49, early 50 when EC came out, and it got so successful. And the Bill and Al Feldstein's inspiration for that was really listening to old radio shows from the early 30s, like the horror radio shows and stuff like that, like Suspense and I don't know, there's a bunch of them, right? And so, once they saw the potential for horror, they started thinking about all the other genres that were out there and emerging in the early 50s, and sci-fi was definitely one of them, especially with atomic energy and the annihilation of nuclear war and just all that kind of stuff. It also tracked really well with what was going on in movies at the time, with sort of B-movie science fiction and stuff. So it basically it was just another outgrowth of that sort of serialized old radio show kind of thing that was going on at the time. And it also, I think, merged really well and wasn't a very big leap for them from their horror stuff, right? So it's I always think of Alien. You think of Alien as both a sci-fi movie and a horror movie, and that's what EC was doing with all these things. So the #1 was Weird Science, which is probably the most the most famous title of all science fiction comics, period, but also probably the most famous title of the EC sci-fi comics. I have to say they didn't stray too far from the mold. Like there was weird science, weird fantasy, and weird science fantasy. Just the.
And wasn't there perversions of science, or am I mixing that up?
No, not the. There wasn't a EC title called Perversions of Science. I think that might have been a. I feel like I've heard of that too, and that might have been like a, in the
TV show.
Yeah, or in the 60s and 70s. So, I mean, these comics were so influential to a whole generation of then people who became comic artists later on in the late 60s and 70s that there could have been somebody did a takeoff called Perversions of Science.
Okay, it was this TV show in the late 90s based that was science fiction horror anthology, which I guess it's one of those things where it's done by HBO. So
there you go.
It's one of those.
I bet you somebody couldn't get the rights.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be a spinoff of Tales from the Crypt, blah, blah, based on those, but they called it something else for, I'm sure, the rights reasons. But yeah, it's funny because everyone's been copying the EC style. Like the line is blurred on what's genuine EC and what's imitation, and then the imitations influence the original. So it's kind of a cycle thing.
Yeah. I appreciate that you're talking to the comics historian, but the internet knows all. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. One man can only know so much.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Everything. All right. Well, let's dive into issue number 1. First of all, there's some really cool covers.
This is so. I hope I hope it's okay for your listeners. But a couple of weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, there was a launch party for the new EC comics at a comic store here in LA, and they had these big stand-ups of the covers, and this cover is beautiful. That's the cover that I got the poster of.
Yeah, that was again, I was at that event too. I was just running into randomly like that, and then run into Hunter Goranson, who the publisher, and then Corey, who is I can remember, is he the grandson or great grandson?
The grandson,
of William Gaines was there. So it was just like this vortex of the awesomeness. So that was a really, really fun event. Also, Revenge of is such a cool place. I
absolutely
never been there before. So afterwards, I just walked around the pinball machines and just was like, what is going on? It's so cool. But yeah, so
I hope they get a liquor license for that back bar, because that'd be a cool place to hang out.
It was a quote dry bar. Which my wife said
exactly. But I don't know if they're going to go further, but it would be awesome if we could get a beer there.
Yeah, I had a ginger drink that was amazing, but that's neither here nor there. All right, so we have some really cool variants. I love the one with the dinosaur and the guy with the spear, which ties into our first thing. But it's just such a cool vibe. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, our first story is called The Champion, and this is very fantasy sci-fi is what I would call it. It's a lot of swords and sandals, but we also got aliens and what looks like a dinosaur, but is some sort of alien dinosaur. And they're basically they're captured and sent to this arena, and we're kind of getting a monologue over what's happening with a couple different characters. Mainly, this one guy who was brought in with all these other aliens, including the dinosaur-looking one, and we see them kind of in their cells and how they're kind of very basic gladiator style, being sent off to fight. And it looks like this one humanoid and the dinosaur looking one are kind of the recurring champions. We get this great commentary where there's these alien kids who are trading these digital cards and everything. That's really cool. I like that stuff. But they're also, the monologue is talking about how they're being commodified and losing their humanity, for lack of a better term. Their soul is just kind of being whittled away, and they have families and things that they're missing. But now they're turning, into straight monsters. And it all kind of builds up into this final arena battle, and we see the man and the dinosaur both, get killed with, a spear and a sword and all that. And then we get the monologue kind of keeps going, and then it's interesting artistically because it's been kind of focusing on the man, and again, I'm just gonna call it dinosaur. It's not a real dinosaur. It's a space alien dinosaur thing.
Sure, but it looks exactly like a Tyrannosaurus.
It looks like a T-Rex. But we kind of notice the art at the very end as both characters are dying from their wounds. It shifts to the dinosaur, And then we come to realize that the monologue we're hearing was actually the dinosaur. And he talks about
Mm-hmm.
how, I'm just going to read this. But somewhere there are two souls that will always remember me as a husband and a father,
Mm-hmm.
whose greatest joy was the birth of his daughter, a simple Grimlax, who spent the end of his life fighting to just go home. And if you see me as an animal, then maybe what you're really seeing is just an image of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns out the whole monologue has been from the dinosaur looking alien. And again, it's supposed to kind of, it's an interesting visual trick where
Mm-hmm.
we kind of
Yeah.
focusing, we're really into the human character, but really what we've been hearing the whole time is the dinosaur character, or
Mm-hmm.
Grimlax,
Mm-hmm.
of it all. What did you think of this one?
I thought that this is classic EC. Like, this one would have worked 70 years ago. This is
Mm-hmm.
exactly the kind of EC story that you would expect. That twist at the end totally makes sense. I'm sure that there was one like this in the past. I also felt really bad for the dinosaur at the end.
Yeah, you're totally
I
supposed
should have known that this wasn't going to work out well, but I was hoping that it was going to work out well. But yeah, it's like, to me, this is what a story to kind of start the series, right? Is like, it sounds like a classic EC story. The plot is exactly the same. Like,
to.
it's really, there's really not that much different than what happened before. Yeah, there's just maybe a little bit more brutality in some of the panels than we
Yeah,
would have seen,
you
but
definitely see you see
otherwise,
a neck kind of get gouged
yeah,
out.
yeah, exactly. You see a head flying off.
Mm.
There's a little sex scene.
Did you call the twist at all before it was revealed?
Yeah, but not until later in the story. I mean,
Mhm.
it kind of dawned on me a little bit in, let's see, I guess the second to last page, when the human's neck gets cut. I was like, wait a
Yeah,
minute, and then kind of realized, oh, this is what's going on. Um,
yeah. And I think I got like one or two panels after that, but
yeah,
I think that's about where they want you to start realizing that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought
Um,
that this would I should have thought more about like a number of pages, but I thought maybe the human and the dinosaur were gonna make a break for it or something.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're expecting that. Like, oh wait, no,
Mm-hmm.
they both they're both not making it.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Again, we can't talk about this one without talking about Epitaphs in the Abyss, and I think
Yeah,
they very smartly started both of those with ones that really could have been, except for a few tweaks,
yeah,
an original story or a story
absolutely.
from the original run. Yeah, I like this one a lot. That
Mm-hmm.
last line doesn't quite jive with me, and maybe I'm just not the
Sure.
whole like. Maybe this is just a mirror of yourself. Kind of something about that wording doesn't settle right per se.
Yeah,
It makes sense.
yeah,
It's just it's a little too on the nose, and maybe
yeah.
that's a wink to the original EC comics.
That's exactly
Um,
right. Like, there was sometimes in those old comics, as you know, like there was like a moral that came out of nowhere, just kind of stuck at the end of it. So that's what I
yeah,
felt like this was like. Yeah.
yeah, but I love how they get the story and the visuals to kind of set you
Mm-hmm.
up for that twist.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of again they're kind of working together
Mm-hmm.
um, to take
Mm-hmm.
us to get us to that place.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a really cool experience reading that. I'm like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and also, I just love the art style. It just feels very classic.
I was gonna say, yeah, and especially like the dinosaur is great.
Hmm.
You can get some pretty bad dinosaurs, but this is really good.
Yeah, and I like the fantasy aspects, like
Mm-hmm.
almost Conan the Barbarian
Yeah.
vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Really like
Mm-hmm.
that. Really like that.
Yeah.
All
Felt
right.
like
All right.
Guardians of the Galaxy a little bit too.
Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy, or like definitely Thor Ragnarok.
Oh yeah,
Not
absolutely.
car,
Mm-hmm.
very much like
Mm-hmm.
that. Okay, our second. Oh, and just because I like to give credits, this was written by Matt Kint, and an artist named Kano. Um, Matt wrote Pistolette, which got Harvey Awards. That's
Oh
a
wow.
really, yeah. I think I read that a while ago.
Huh.
That's a really good one.
Oh cool. I've never read it.
All right.
I was gonna say, like, just really fast,
Mhm.
the fact that story was such a classic, tale. I wonder how much the writer read of EC, how much he
Mhm.
absorbed, what was the process to get to that. Like, like it seems like a pretty simple story, but because it's such a great sort of throwback to what was in the past, I feel like it was kind of hard to get the right tone, and I'm just wondering how difficult that was.
Yeah. But no, I think he nailed that one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Our second comic is called Solo Shift. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, we have a man on a deep space exploration of a black hole. And he's getting kind of a breakup letter from his girlfriend back home because they've been away for so long. And he's,
Mm-hmm.
really pissed about it. But then there's an alert that there's another ship that shouldn't be out there. We do get a view of the black hole, and it's kind of fun. That's like the more revised, like
Mm-hmm.
the Interstellar version of
Interstellar,
black
yeah.
hole. Is what made me think of that. So again, we're kind of updating things a little bit from what they would have been of what the idea of a
Mm-hmm.
black hole back then was. So anyways, he sees a ship, shouldn't be there. He can't contact them. And he's like, no real way that he can contact his home base or wherever it is, but
Mm-hmm.
it's very slow. So he's like, I'm just gonna go check it out. He goes out there and he finds a woman who's dead, and there's blood everywhere, and there's a handprint and everything, but there's no sign that anyone else is on the ship. It looks like she was recently murdered as
Mm-hmm.
well. So it's kind of a mystery of, well, how did she die? It's kind of like those old riddles you tell when you're kids of like, there's a man dead in the room with a puddle of water. How did he die?
That's
Those
right.
kind of
Yeah.
things. Anyways, and he looks on her logs and everything, and I think he's kind of falling in love with her a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
especially just after getting dumped.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a little lonely, I would say.
Yeah.
But there's no logs of anything that happened out of the ordinary, but he did see that she was attempting to time travel.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides that he wants to save her, so he decides to time travel himself. And as soon as I heard time travel, I kind of figured where this was going.
Yeah, me too.
So he goes back in time and he sees her ship, and he goes in to try to save her, but she freaks out and she has a knife on her because she was pruning some plants or whatever it was, and she won't calm down, and he grabs her and pushes her against the wall. And then we find out obviously he's the one that murdered her, so he's kind of in a time loop.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's just kind of like up below his hand. He's like, oh no.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really say what happens next. It just kind of ends right there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of this one?
Also sort of felt like sort of a classic throwback a little bit, but this one was fine. This one was good. I don't want to be super negative. I did feel like
you can be honest. I will be honest.
This wasn't my favorite of the bunch. I think I think there's a couple things for me, like the fact that for one thing, he reads these logs. So there's a dead body of a girl there, and then he reads the logs, and he falls in love with her so much that he's gonna go through the black hole, I guess, and go time travel. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's looking
I think a dead body in the room would not make me motivated to do that much. But as you said, he's very lonely, and that's very true. So who knows what's going to happen out in space? But it seemed a little bit like very guy perspective kind of a thing. And then and like you said too, like I kind of saw where this was going pretty early on, so I wasn't too surprised, and it didn't make that sort of connection to me.
Yeah, I agree. It would have definitely helped if they would have emphasized his loneliness. So if he was going a little bit, excuse me, and maybe that video he gets from his old girlfriend would have helped things out, or was there to kind of point that out, but it didn't really have the impact I think they were hoping it to have.
Yeah. I also didn't understand, like, when he goes over to the ship, there's warnings that he's disregarding of, like, don't go to the ship or don't do, like, and that was never resolved. So I'm not sure. I thought that there was going to be some sort of alien that comes out, or there was like, whatever, but yeah. So I guess in that sense, it twisted in a different way for me.
Yeah, but it doesn't. It wasn't enough of misdirection, and it's one of those things. When you're watching something, you don't really want to be too far ahead of the movie or like where they want you to be. And I think us having read these kind of things and being in this world, once we hear time travel, okay, we know who the guy is. We know who the murderer is.
That's true.
And I don't know if they meant for us to figure that out so quickly, or if we're just too attuned to it. We just kind of.
That's a great point. You're absolutely right. And so, looking at this as a, let's say a 16-year-old kid buying this at the comic book store or something like that, they might be like, oh crap, I never saw that coming. So
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, the artwork is okay.
Yeah.
The time travel sequence is visually interesting. I'll give it
Mm-hmm.
that. But the rest of it is just kind of kind of just I wouldn't say boring at all, but doesn't really stand out.
Sure.
And maybe they don't want too many of these to be too stylistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but because some visual flair would have been nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
but I along those lines though, I thought it was cool that they kept, the black hole's got this sort of orangey,
mhm.
thing, and it really does reflect throughout the whole thing. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's
there's
much
some
more. The
flourishes.
style is very lonely and dark. I feel like I
Yeah,
think that's what
okay,
it was
that's
going for.
true. That's true. There's a lot of reddish orange, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of light blue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because a friend of mine says all posters have that combination.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like something about color science is supposed to be very pleasing to the eye.
Ah, interesting.
At least that's the theory. So yeah. This one is written by Kareem and Caitlin Yarsky. I wasn't really familiar with either of their work.
Mm-mm.
Um, all right, moving on. We have the next one is called Drink Up. And here we
Yeah.
have a eccentric billionaire type, trillionaire, whatever you want to call it, who's on a search for the miracle of life or the tree of life or the something to the usual holy grail kind of Indiana
Mm-hmm.
Jones,
Mm-hmm.
some way to cheat death. And this one takes place, at least as far as I can tell, entirely on Earth.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's the most grounded in that aspect of all
Mm-hmm.
these. And basically, he's been climbing up some cliff, and then he gets a visit from one of his employees who says that they think they found the well of life, and they go and check it out. And supposedly, it's a very dangerous, volatile area that could crumble in on itself any second. But he's like, oh, the usual hubris
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
time waits for no man. Yada, yada. And they even call it the devil's scar. That's what they
Yeah,
call it. Like that's not ominous.
yeah. you know,
And
just
go ahead.
really fast with hubris, that's I feel like that is a EC theme, and it's also
Mhm.
something from the last story, right? The one that we just talked about with the ships,
Yeah.
right? I think one of the guy part of that story was, here's a guy, he's going to go to the ship and checks it out. He finds a dead body. He goes back in time, and he just basically barges in on this woman. It's like, hey, I'm here to rescue you and be your boyfriend. Let's do it. And then she's like, well, who the hell are you?
Right.
So I think I guess in that sense, I'm glad she fought back, even though it didn't turn out well for her.
Well, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's the appropriate reaction when you're on
Exactly.
this exhibition and the man just stumbles into your ship
Right.
and runs at you.
Yeah. What do you expect was going to happen, dude? And I feel like
Yeah.
with this one, it's the same. I get the same vibe. And one of the other things I loved about this story was how contemporary, just in the past year or two, there's that billionaire who's like
Oh, the
trying
Titanic
to do
one.
all of this stuff, right? Is
Oh,
really trying to stay young and be really active and stuff like that. So I thought it was
yeah.
great that it's ripped from the headlines kind of a story.
Well, I was going with the people in that sub that were trying
Oh
to go to
yes,
the Titanic.
exactly.
Well,
Yes.
just to finish the synopsis,
Yeah,
and
sorry.
that's fine. And I don't remember if we said this off top, but obviously we're well into this. We're doing spoilers, so if you haven't seen it,
Yeah.
you probably should have said that sooner, but
True.
I'll probably put a spoiler thing on the title. Anyway, so the guy, goes to the mines, and then within like 5 minutes, he finds this underground well with
Mm-hmm.
this like trough of water and these columns and everything. He starts drinking
Mm-hmm.
from it, and he goes, "Ha, eternal life, it's mine!" And then, of course, as soon as he does that, the whole thing falls in on itself.
Mm-hmm.
And before he can get out of there, one of the columns falls on him and crushes him and pushes him under the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can hear, I don't know if it's supposed to be his employee who is kind of skeptical. He says, "Well, sir, eternal life, it's now all yours. Drink it up."
Yeah.
So we get this panel of him underwater, kind of gurgling on the water, but I guess he's now immortal, so he's just going to be stuck there drinking it for all time.
That's the part. Yeah. So that's how I read it too. So I didn't when I first saw it, and it gets before I looked down to the last frame, I was like, oh, he just when they were talking about the earthquake stuff, I figured okay, there was going to be something that he gets either trapped or crushed or whatever. But then when I looked at the last frame or last panel and thought about it a little more, I'm like, he's stuck underwater, can't move anywhere, but he's gonna live forever. So he got his wish, but it doesn't really do much for him.
Yeah, I think I feel like this one's a little bit on the rush side, and almost, if anything, a little too wordy. If that's such a thing, like there's almost like too much happening, like in the exposition in the beginning. Like they could have just cut that down a little bit, and maybe had a little bit more of him going through the cavern and thinking about it, or at least, and also maybe a little bit more showing his reaction or his loneliness, being stuck in this predicament.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things that sometimes AC Comics does, where they kind of hit you with that twist.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't give it a moment to breathe or to show the impact. Which again is the EC style, but another panel or something where he's like showing him alone in his predicament, I think would have really driven it home.
Like 500 years in the future, and he's still stuck down there.
Exactly. I want to see 500 years. His like beard is like his hair's all grown out and everything's just still just laying there drinking water, like, or drinking his tears or something. Yeah, that's the kind of twisted shit I want.
It's amazing.
But it's an interesting idea, and again, we live in a time where I guess hubris is eternal, especially of people who are of ultra wealthy or have the ultra means to
absolutely
follow that hubris. I think hubris is innate in all of us to a degree, but
sure,
only when you have the tools to really take it to those extreme levels.
Yeah.
Again,
that's why.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. I keep talking over you. Sorry, man.
That's fine.
That's why I like this one, because I guess I am looking for the new EC for all of them. I'm really excited to see how they take an EC approach to contemporary times, and that it's not just a total throwback, but it's obviously diversifying characters and stuff like that, but also we live in a time of great absurdity, and to have a real life billionaire who's trying to look younger than his own kid is crazy. And it's crazy that he can afford to do that. So I'm glad that they're attacking this stuff, and I hope they keep kind of poking at contemporary times. Because to me, one of the great things about EC is that especially with the crime stuff, but even the horror, they were totally making fun of and skewering suburbia and conformity and stuff like that. So there's a lot to play around with now.
Yeah, definitely. All right. This one was done by Chris Condon, who did that Texas Flood, and art by Jonathan Case. And again, this is a very good throwback style too. I really enjoy that. It felt very G.I. Joe in a way, like old school G.I. Joe.
Oh, interesting. One of the things I liked about this, besides the story and the sort of throwback aspect, is that the artwork is completely different than all of the other ones. Like, it's strikingly different than the others. And I feel like that was also something that happened in the past, that there was always one artist whose style was a little wonky, and they'd throw in, one story, which was just kind of made it more of a stark contrast to everything else.
Yeah, I think each of these has very different art, which I really appreciate. Which again might hurt Solo Shift a little bit because its art isn't as showy as the other ones in comparison to on its own. Right, it might be fine, but when you compare it to some of the striking artwork in some of these other ones, I think it kind of brings it down by comparison. All right, our last one is Priceless. Here we have a man. He's looking a little bit like the dude, a little Big Lebowski type. He's got big beard, long hair. He's just kind of wearing baggy pants and stuff. Anyways, he's bungee jumping, and then he's kind of paying the guy, the operator. He's like, "Do you have fun?" He's like, "Nope." And he just says, "I need a receipt." So it's like obviously he's not really enjoying what most people would see as a thrilling experiment. And he goes to some sort of facility, and they're doing something where they're like, he's got like a little patch in his head, and they're like pointing some instrument to it, and it doesn't really make sense, at least at first, what they're doing. They're doing something with it, some brainy stuff. And then he gets handed another envelope to do his next task. And we see him, kind of, he goes to a bar. He's just kind of like, I need another drink. He's not in a good mood. This guy's not having a good time. And then we see him stalking this woman who walking her dog. He grabs her and ties her up in her house. And he's just talking about how there's this rich old man that he's working for who's paralyzed. And he wishes he could do things and gain these experiences. But the only way that he can get them is by, I guess, sucking out the memories from him or transferring the memories or copying the memories. They don't say exactly. So basically, what we come to learn is that there's the system wherein people can kind of like it's kind of a little Total Recall-ish, where you can have these experiences and then transfer them to someone else so they can understand it. So he goes to give the woman water, and she starts pleading and saying, like, do you really want this to be an experience? Because obviously it's going to murder her. And she's like, well, can't you have the experience of being a hero instead of being the murderer? Which do you think is more exciting? And I didn't quite understand this part, but the guy like gets sick, it looks like. And he walks away and releases the woman, and then these like other people that work for the old man kind of follow him, and we see the woman gets away. Gentleman is just kind of waiting, I think, at his apartment or something like that, and these other guys, agents of the elderly man, the rich man, break in, just shoot him straight to dead. But they're still able to get the memory out, and they give it to the old man. And they're saying, oh, well, we'll have to find a new experiencer. It'll be some trouble, but I do hope this experience was worth it. So again, it's kind of probably a high turnover profession.
Yeah.
But then the old man says, he says, they say, was it worth it to have, what this guy went through? And the old man says, worth it to feel the uncomplicated satisfaction of having acted with nobility, to stand up for a stranger in the heartless world. That is priceless. The end. What did you think of this one?
I like this one a lot. In fact, I think of all of them, I like this one the most. I thought that I wasn't quite sure what the twist was going to be, and at the end to have the twist be that the old man is, maybe his intent was for the guy to kill the woman and have the thrill of that. But then he changes his mind and thinks that he sort of gets the moral that the experiencer got and then had to die for. The idea that maybe the old man set this whole thing up, like his way of getting a heroic thing was to actually get the experiencer killed in this way. So like, the old man could have just, maybe the last panel is like the old man is having a change of heart and thinking like, oh, I should never ask somebody to kill somebody for me again. Or maybe the old man is really that nefarious and he's like, I'm after this thrill and some guy got killed, but I don't care. Anyway, I just thought it was good.
He does not seem to care about.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, I thought it was well done, and especially in the short time that it was, and I really didn't know exactly where this thing was going.
Yeah, this one gives me a little bit of like Blade Runner vibes, where it's kind of like near future dystopian almost. We get some like views of some of the architecture, feels very Blade Runner-y to me. And just kind of the man kind of going through his life, as a clog in someone else's machine, and he's just really being used as the instrument for someone else's pleasure, for lack of a better term. I could see a whole world. I think it's a very interesting concept of being paid to have experiences for other people's pleasure. It's interesting because at first I was really confused by the bungee jumping part. That really threw me off. I had to read that. I had to look at that one through a couple times. It's one of the things where I wasn't supposed to get at the time. It's very high concept, and I feel like there's a lot being said about consumerism and the working class versus upper class or high class, whatever you want to call it. And then the fact that this guy doesn't really have any qualms about even attacking this woman, and he's like, he seems like he's generally going to kill her. He doesn't really care. That's just right. And then he has that momentary change of heart, and I'm curious whether it's his conscience that is kicking in, or he's like about her, or about his task overall, or what his life has become. It'd been interesting to explore that, at least briefly.
Sure.
Because when his only protest is he says, if I don't, then I'm dead. Don't you get it? Oh God, I feel sick. And then he just kind of like flips and just and decides to leave her or release her. But I really like the art concept here. It's a little bit more minimalistic in ways,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but still, again, this feels very heavy metal almost.
Ha!
The old comics, the heavy metal comics.
That's for sure. Yeah, especially I think the page where the thugs come to get him,
Hmm.
or maybe discover that she's escaped or something like that, whatever it was. But there's like one line, two lines of dialogue in the entire page, and it's just all like dark reds and blues and grays.
Yeah,
That's cool.
very cool. Yeah, this one feels very Philip K. Dick, which again I'll reference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Total
Yes.
Recall, but yeah, it seems very much of that more high
Mm-hmm.
sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
vein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
To me, as a story,
mhm.
this was the one that yeah, just it felt more satisfying, more high concept, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I like this whole thing, the whole issue, so there's no complaints. But this one to me was a good socket to the jaw ending.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so this was written by Ben Winters. He's on a lot of stuff, but his big breakout, which I kind of love, is Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters. If you remember that one, that made a little bit of a wave. I think it was
Yeah,
like 2010 or 29. The artist is Atram Topolin. Really cool art style.
yeah.
Kind of wrapping my overall thoughts. I think this is actually a little bit more even than Epitaphs was. Where I
Mm-hmm.
said Epitaphs had some highs and some lows. This one I think is a little bit more evened out
Mm-hmm.
than that one. I still think they have a little bit ways to go to perfect it, but I see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of potential. I'm really excited to read the next one. Again,
Mm-hmm.
the cover for the next one looks really cool too.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, yeah, they showed a bunch of the covers, and they all look
Yeah.
really neat. I'm
Yeah. I
kind of
don't know.
torn. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. What?
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't know who's doing the cover for the next one. I think it's the same person who did the cover for this one, but I really love that sort of painterly style. It looks
Yeah,
great.
you're talking about the one with the robot head or some
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, going overall, I'm trying to think about which is my favorite. I kind of love the first one, because
Mm-hmm.
the ending really got me. It was really, it just felt again very classic AC, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
kind of the hit I'm kind of looking for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, that's cool.
I think Fault Priceless is really good too. Again, I could see like a whole series or like that whole universe,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's always a good thing when they leave you wanting more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm
Uh,
with you too. I think the two strongest stories for me are the first story and the last story. I mean, the whole thing was great. Again, I loved in the third story. I really loved the sort of contemporary twist and sort of bringing it back to 2024, which is great. I think in my order, I would reverse your top two.
mhm, that's fine. Everyone's entitled.
Thank you. Thanks. But yeah,
Um,
overall, I thought this was great. And again, like it's not just the first story to me, but the whole thing felt very much like a Weird Science from 1953. Like it's got all the nuggets and all the ingredients to it.
cool. I'm sure that's as much as they would hope for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I also, like I said, like I hope they don't get stuck in that. Like I'm not necessarily a fan who's looking to just recreate the exact same thing from before. Like I guess I was surprised might be the right word, but like yeah, I guess surprised like how much they were able to capture the old EC, and I think that's great, and it definitely was satisfying. I also don't want them to get stuck in that. Like it shouldn't be this formula because you know how cool is it that a property that we've loved for such a long time that was stuck in a very specific time, and we could always think like, oh, what would have happened if EC could have kept doing the sci-fi and horror comics through the 50s and the 60s and see what happens. Like now here's the chance to do it, so let's evolve the thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we can definitely see the seeds of evolution in there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think now it's just going to be calibrating like how much do they do, how
Sure.
far do they go, what's too far from all
Mm-hmm.
that. So it's all going to be calibration. But they keep making it. I'll keep reading it, and I
Yes,
hope a lot of
indeed.
other people do too and give it a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is really good.
Hmm. All right. Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people follow you?
at CaptLA. So that's at CAPTLA. That's sort of our handle for all the socials, and that's the best way to keep on top of things. Also, we also have a side social at Comic Book Crackdown. That's specific to the musical, but in general, CaptLA is good for all the latest news.
Cool. All right, yeah, we'll definitely keep everyone abreast of any events that you have. We'll be sharing and all that stuff. Thank you so much for coming on and helping me review this. And
thanks for asking me.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again very shortly.
Absolutely. Hopefully, there's going to be lots more of these coming out. So
yes. And we've had a very nice response to the Epitaphs from the Abyss YouTube video. So thank you to everyone who watched that. And please like and subscribe just to show that you're interested. If you guys watch it, we'll keep making them. And also, give us a rating reviews on iTunes, rating on Spotify. We are at Dads from the Crypt Talk on TikTok. And with that, we thank you for listening to Dads from the Crypt.
Thanks a lot.
Follow Dads from the Crypt on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or I will follow you to the grave. No, seriously, you really should watch. But be careful what you ask for. You may get it.